again. Sorry about that. It's definitely a really good topic today. So we want to make sure it's right. And then it'll also we'll have our podcast with it. Just adding Mark into it. Send the request through, Mark. Thank you. There we go. Go live with Mark adding in. Mark, how you going? All righty, take two.
Hey, big topic today. We're going to be screwed in. We're stuffed in 3 or 4 years if we don't have some buildings. We're out of buildings. We're out of buildings. Quick, build them.
And no one's building. No one's building before they fall down. No, it's probably bad.
Okay, so Michael, we warmed up nicely previously. What's the topic here?
Yeah, so the topic is, there was an article a couple of days ago basically saying building approvals for Sydney are down 40%. So that's not really a today's problem, because the pipeline, as we'll say, is about 3 to 4 years from buying the land, getting it approved and then building it. But it is a today's problem because we need to act on it now. Otherwise, no, it's a today problem, but we don't feel the pain for a couple of years. That's probably the bigger thing.
Now, it's pretty rare that we have a topic that's holistic and that applies to everybody. This topic is really interesting because prospective tenants could have rents unachievable and out of control. Landlords could have rents going up. People that own property could have their prices going up, but they can't upgrade because they can't afford it. First home buyers can't afford to get in the market. So the big question on this topic is affordability. We're really messing and meddling with affordability when we are not putting a consistent pipe into Sydney for building. People don't think about it because they don't think ahead. They think, oh, we're lining developers' pockets, or councils are being a bit optimistic in allowing more building. But it's not that at all. It's affordability.
100%. And I think what we said in the comments was, like, your average Joe, as much as we can say there's the factors of the banks, the builders, like, why is this pipe? Why is it slowed down? Who does it affect? People may think, oh, it's just a greedy developer. It doesn't bother me, but it does, because if we're still buying property, the population is still growing, and if we don't have new stock coming onto the market, then that's exactly what you said. Property prices will go through the roof. I think a big thing we saw in our backyard of DY was how well we had there'd been no new units for a very long time, like 30 years we've been sitting on the same density of apartments. And then over 3 years, we had about 600 units dropped in over that time. Yep. Everyone at first was like, oh, that's too many units. But you really saw people who wouldn't normally buy in the area buy into the area because there was new stock available that's not normally available. It created a new price point for people to buy into, and it allowed people to move. It gave people a reason to upsize, downsize, move from older unit. And
that's big. That's cross-stimulating different sectors of the market. So people don't realize that when you develop a 2-bedroom unit, you're actually giving accommodation to someone for a house, because grandma sells the house to a young couple. So now they've got suddenly that's a bit more. Now there's more houses being dropped into the grid because grandma's moving into a 2-bedroom unit. So people think, who the hell wants a 2-bedroom unit? But people have got to understand that cross-pollinates all the other sectors of categories of properties: studios, 2-bedders, 3-bedders, penthouses, townhouses, even new subdivisions. It all cross-pollinates when you drop in new property.
Yeah, and also that chain reaction. If people aren't buying and selling, there's no stamp duty for the government. There's no lawyers being stimulated. The agents, like, it's just like our wealth of Australia. There's so much to do relying on property, and if we're not having the new stock come on, property prices are going to go up. It means affordability, which is probably the biggest thing that's going to hit the area, is the affordability. Like, can you imagine if DY? We know down at DY because we're a bit more familiar with it, but the principles will go everywhere. If we didn't have these new units injected, like, could you imagine the property prices of your traditional apartment? It just would have, it already grew, 50% DY in probably the couple of years prior to that. and it just would have kept on growing and growing.
Look, you could also argue that our correction in the marketplace, if the government wanted to slow the property market down, they effectively did slow the property market down. But something that helped that take the steam out of that property market, guess what? New property. So if there wasn't that new property being dumped in the last 5 years, you would have potentially had such an overheated property market, such an unaffordable property market. You see, now, get this, now a first home buyer can buy a 1-bedroom unit in parts of Sydney. Most parts of Sydney, certainly not the east, but definitely northern beaches and most parts of Sydney, 500 grand. 500 grand at a 3% interest rate is 15 grand a year. 15 grand a year is 300 a week. Guys, 300 a week to buy my first property and to live in that property, that's bloody cheap. So because the market's peeled back 10 or 20% in a lot of Sydney, it's actually made it 20% more affordable in terms of the capital of the property. Then what we've had is the interest rates come down to half. It's so affordable now for people to get into property, and that's because new properties has been dumped into the market.
But all that's at risk if we're not getting approvals through, and new property is going to come back on the market. So we're going to get through this period, and then in another 2 years, if there's no more new properties, then it's just going to do the reverse. Property prices will go back up. It won't become affordable, and it's just that cycle. So it's almost like you take with one hand, you got to give. So we got to be, even though things are more affordable at the moment, if we, by looking at the approvals down 40%, that's huge. And I think population growth's probably up significant. I don't know that I can probably get the stat. Christian Stevens generally has some good stats on the population growth. It's up. I think
that's a good one. You know, do we need more properties? No. In terms of you and in terms of me and our parents and our relatives. But suddenly when you start introducing hundreds of thousands of people into Sydney every year, of course you have to have new property. If you don't actually have those houses matched for those people that are coming in, those people are going to directly compete against you and I, which are those immigrants that are coming into Sydney are going to compete. If they're going to compete, they're going to pay more. If they're going to pay more, everything gets more expensive. So there's got to be a certain amount of flow. I think Sydney normally knocks in about 60 to 80,000 properties per year. If that goes down to 20 or 30,000, it's going to put a lot of pressure on pricing. So, and we haven't even talked about jobs. We haven't even talked about the flow-on effect, because our property industry, it's so easy for us to be narrow-minded and say, okay, property buildings are down by 40%. But if you look at our industry, if you look at you take the property industry out of the marketplace, that leaves a big dent in our economy.
So what could stimulate it? What triggers? Are we talking about, do councils need to speed up their approvals? Does the market need to go down more for developers to buy? Does there need to be less red tape in the construction? Like, do they need, like, what do you see that can stimulate getting these approvals up and encourage developers? Because I know Luke and we've been commenting a fair bit, like the amount of developers dumping stock, it's huge. Lend-Lease, Third Eye Group, these are big guys who don't traditionally sell. So are they dumping because they don't see the market going well? Are they dumping stuff they've made money on to buy more? Like, what's happening? What's your thoughts?
Do you know what I reckon? And I'm talking to some of the biggest developers in Sydney, and the one common strain in the fabric that they all have a really hard thing about is compliance. And at the end of the day, it is so expensive to be so compliant in Australia, in Sydney. It becomes very, very expensive in Sydney, Australia. So what's going to happen is we're going to get more compliant. Now, Michael, everyone who's watching, what the hell happened to Sydney when we got more compliant with lockout laws? We out-snookered ourselves. We had a problem. We didn't deal with the problem properly, and we knocked our economy around really hard. We knocked it for 6. The city of Sydney got knocked on its bum for nightlife, and a lot of its e-commerce at night was just deleted, right? or it's not e-commerce, commerce, right? So
Yeah.
what's going to happen? And I don't think this has been discussed yet, but I know it's on the radar. Is all this shit building that's happening? Do we want to? If the government turns around and overreacts and over-regulates, building will become expensive by another 20 or 40%. And guess what?
The average Joe will be paying for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the knock-on effect.
And that's the scary thing. Like good morning, Lisa. Luke Moroney, good points. Why developers dumping stock? Lending's tough compliance with new building mascot. But then again, here's the advocate. A lot of the sort of taking a punt here, a lot of the compliance and issues are coming from developers trying to lower their costs in building to make it feasible to build. So
there's nothing wrong, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way.
There's nothing wrong with that.
That's it's like tax. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just you try to lower your tax because you don't want to pay it, right? So at the end of the day, when it starts hurting people, I've got a problem with it. When building, with Opal and stuff like that, I've got a problem with it. But a lot of this compliance stuff, this nanny state stuff, is just absolutely screwing us. And I think going back to the core of what we're talking about today, why are building approvals down 40%? I think, we've got to be really careful about this topic, and I think we've got to handle it really in a clever way. And look, I get that we are a glorified fruit shop on the corner of DY, we call ourselves a real estate agency. We're not going to really make a change, but we're the guys towing the line at the end of the line, and I can see the problem a mile away.
Yeah, and as you did touch on it before, like that buyer perception of new stock has really been smeared. So is that why some of the big guys
Did you say smeared? Is that different? That's different to smeared. It's smeared.
Smeared.
Is that a Jewish word? Wow. Wow. You're throwing out some, nice little. It's very Euro. Yeah, I like it.
I don't know how subtitles will work with that one. I guess smear. Smear.
Oh, don't smear it.
Like that whole, it's probably the developing world or new construction's probably never had, well, probably I wouldn't say never, but it's probably got a bad taste in everybody's mouth. So maybe that's why a lot of the big guys are dumping stock. They don't see that changing anytime soon, which would be a shame, or they've got wind of some really big compliance changes happening. I know even on the ground here in some retail shops, compliance now for doing a fit out for a cafe, it's like doubled the fit out cost, and that's affecting your average Joe. And that's where we were going with this. We're not crying poor for developers or anything like that. It's the end of the day, it starts with them and it affects the average Joe. So with all this compliance, if it goes too crazy, people won't be able to open up a cafe because the fit out's gone from 60 grand to 200 grand, and that's just to do the same shit they're doing last year, but the compliance and the red tape. That's the problem. And if new builds aren't happening, a unit's going to be 500 grand. It's now going to be 800,000. Because remember, look at how our visas are. Population's growing, tourism and immigration is growing, and our visas basically say they want them to buy property. And I believe it even says new property as well. So they're going to be competing from that. So you're going to have, it's just going to make it very, very hard and competitive for your average Joe or Australian here. I think that's the bigger issue.
Very, very interesting, guys. And you know what? I think the first thing for our viewers that are watching today, I think when we're conscious about these things that we're touching on, I think you're halfway there. But I think when it's unconscionable and we get 3 or 4 down the track, we don't have a pipe of building, compliance is off the charts. It's very expensive to build. Property price, no one's giving out money. Then I get that the changes start happening. But I just don't think it should be an overreaction from people. I think that's really, really risky to be 5 years down the track and trying to do something. Because as I said before, it's a 36-month pipe or it's a 48-month pipe. By the time a developer buys the property, procures the property, gets property through council, gets the property built, gets the property compliant and sold, and people move in, it can be a 48-month pipe. So that's where we're heading at the moment. If we don't change, if we make a change in 48 months, then we're really screwed, because we're still going to wait 48 months.
It's almost going to be the opposite, like the government not to do something, to do something to overreact. Like, it's almost like they need to do something to encourage. It's down 40%. Like, how much worse can it get? Like, if you look at the Royal Commission, how that basically put a lot of the market on hold for 12 months, and it had an effect to slow down the market. Like, even just the fear and all this new compliance that may be coming in, and the Opal Towers, like it's dropped 40%. So we don't need anything to slow it down. We need a good positive movement forward. I think an easy one's probably lending. What would be the fastest way to stimulate that through? Would probably be lending, opening money up for developers. Is it the right thing? I don't know. What's your thoughts? I suppose if we need those approvals up, give them money a bit easier.
Probably lending's one, and I think number two is compliance. Is two. That compliance is a really hard tackle for them to topic for them to tackle. Given stuff like the Opal stuff that's going on, and funding's a really hard one for them to tackle. I think the council's still pretty tough in what it does, but again, that ties back to compliance.
Yeah.
But you know what's really interesting, guys? I never really cared about building approvals. I didn't really think it affected me in DY, in the Northern Beaches. But I've always noticed the media harping on building approvals, and now it sort of makes sense. It starts to crystallise now. We're like, well, okay, I get it
but
now.
Also, we just had a really good effect of how well it can stimulate an area. Look at DY building approvals, because DY didn't have new buildings up until the last 5 years, or enough to really make an impact. Now we've had the Meriton, the Carlisle, the Osprey. We've just seen basically a suburb reborn. So I think we're probably at the ground seeing it and quite passionate about it, because we've just seen the benefit of buildings, building approvals, and the tenants. People moving in absolutely love the good quality, the new buildings, good quality, and that town centre built. So to hear that they're down will mean other areas won't get this.
And you know what we've done? Person by person, piece by piece, unit by unit, we have converted hundreds of people's, which would then be convert to thousands, hundreds of people's attitudes towards our suburb. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Like, this was a suburb that people going, thank you, but no thank you. And as a real estate agent, would you consider buying in DY? Thank you, but no thank you. We've got so many no thank yous, and we've said to the guys, look, we just want to show you this place in Meriton, or we just want to show you this place in Carlisle. Just have a look. Now they've moved in, they bloody love it. So that's the end of the pipe. The beginning of the pipe is getting the approvals in to start gentrifying these suburbs and beautifying these suburbs.
Well, we look at DY.
Brookvale's the next one.
Yeah, Brookvale's the next one. Look at DY. I think there's only two real DA approved. Well, one DA across the road from us, 76 units.
Yep.
So that's probably the closest thing if it gets built now. And then the other one in Oaks, it's not even approved. It's in the pipe. Like, that's only 100 units, really, 150 units over the next 3 years going to be built. So it's not much in an area with 8,500.
Very interesting. So, we got any questions from our viewers, Michael?
Look, building costs to increase, might not take viable develop in the next 2 years. Yeah, building costs, a lot of it comes with the compliance, the land vows, also the adjustment. I think it's always hard to purchase sites with land acquisition when you don't know what the GR value is. You look at what you can build, and when it can be it can vary from 10-20% of the GR. It's pretty big. Northern Beaches to boom in the next 3+ years, 100%. And that goes off the back of Brookvale as well, Luke. So Brookvale, then Mona Vale as well is earmarked, and then Ingleside eventually as well. I did a poll on that on my Insta going, should it be developed? I think it was about 80% said yes. But we've had two large big developers pull out, Sunland and someone else who had, I believe, hundreds of millions of dollars of land holding. Like, it makes it tough for an area. Same as French's Forest. So that comes off where would you build a high rise in Sydney now? So does that mean in the area, or is that rhetorical? Where would you build a high rise in Sydney
I
now?
reckon follow the richest man in Australia.
Harry. DY, another one.
Yeah.
Kidding.
I think if you look at one Harry Triggerboff, Meriton owner, and look at his philosophy, I think he builds for the masses, and I think he loves to stick to his train lines, and he loves to stick to undeveloped CBD, undeveloped sort of CBDs almost, and then off he goes. So Parramatta's his latest big one that he's tackled. So
57 stories. You know what?
Have a look where he's going. And look, I don't know if I don't know where the motivation, that question that's come through, but certainly for Australia's biggest developer, he knows how to make money, and that's where he's gone.
You know what I'd love to see, Mark? Even though the sale market may not be there in question for the property market, I would love to see an incentive for from the banks or the government for developers to continue building, but the build to rent model. So make an encouragement because the issue is if a developer can't get funding if they can't sell them, but if there's some sort of other criteria that the government or a bank will fund that building if it's built to rent, because they know that it's going to get rented really easy. Like we did 40 units basically before a building settled, Carlisle before it settled. The demand for renting at the moment is huge, but a lot of the equations when they're going to lend money is obviously if they can get the pre-sales. But if there's some sort of avenue, because we still want new construction to be built, even if it's not being built to sell it straight away, build it to rent it, and then maybe when the market picks up or is a bit more stable, then they could do it there. So I'd love to see a shift, but not just go under the boarding house or build a building that you'd strata it, sell it off, but different sort of looking at it from different eyes to rent, because as we said, it's going to affect the average Joe who needs to pay for the higher rents if new buildings aren't being built. We saw it with Carlisle. DY hadn't had new buildings for a very long time, and the rents they were getting in there were phenomenal. So, and if that weren't being built, then they're just going to get higher. So, but yeah, I think you're almost here, Mark. You're going to join me from my end now.
This is going to be a first. Just because we spoke so much today, it's just out of control.
Yeah.
Look.
Where is it? We've got the
setup here.
here.
There it is.
Hey, how are you, everyone?
Oh, look at that. Oh, wow.
Everywhere.
There you go, there. And there.
I'm everywhere.
Oh, my God.
We're together.
That's crazy. This is normally a conference that's but now it's.
So you get like 1, 2, 3, 4 cameras.
Yeah, that's our
3
setup.
headphones. Let me show you the other end. Well, yeah.
No, I don't even know what I'm doing, but that's us.
1,
That's
2,
all,
3,
folks.
4 screens.
Look at that.
It's pretty hectic.
Hectic. Have a great day.
Alrighty, guys. Enjoy your Saturday. Thanks for tuning in.
See you, mate.
Cheers. Bye. Hang on. We're still on Zoom. Hang on.